grateful for the acknowledgement of rising standards from both speakers, and the TIMS survey shows the international evidence of us actually doing better compared to other countries. I actually also really welcome David Laws' highlighting of London, because London shows a more general trend. The biggest rise in results has actually happened in the last 10 years in those schools with the greatest concentration of children on free school meals. But what I'd like to do is pick up the three different David Laws themes on policy. Well, I have to say, although we agree about some detail, David and I agree about many things. But although Michael didn't want to talk very much about policy, if we actually get onto policy, I fundamentally disagree with Michael on a number of things. First of all, accountability. Intelligent accountability is key. The report card is our only way to break out of the unfair and narrow school league tables and genuinely measure schools who deliver for every pupil. Michael, though, says we should keep the existing school league tables. The change he wants to make is to have key stage 2 tests marked by secondary school teachers in the first term of secondary school and then pass back to hold primary schools to account. That would be unfair, narrow and divisive. Secondly, on the issue of centralisation and localism, it's completely right that in the early period, Baker, Shepherd, Blunkett, we were more central through national strategies, the way in which we did things. I think now, because of the strength of leadership we've got, it is right that we let go and give more discretion over the curriculum and funding to local communities. I think the idea that you would start off in the first few weeks of a new government by rewriting the national curriculum to prescribe the detail of how history is taught in every school, other than those which opt out, would be a backward step towards centralism. I also think, and to go back to the Banbury School example, what they do in Banbury School and many other schools around the country is they use subjects like dance, music, sport, IT, to engage young people with learning, get them excited about coming to school, and then use that to raise standards in maths and English. Michael says these are soft subjects, which parents don't really want, and therefore we should exclude sport, music, IT, dance from school-to-school comparisons and only compare schools on what he calls hard subjects. That would be a massive step back towards a divisive curriculum. Finally, funding. David Laws has got, I think, the courage to say he wants to spend £2.5 billion more than we're doing, even over the next 3 years with our rising budgets, by abolishing tax credits for some and the Child Trust Fund. I think that wouldn't be the right thing to do. I think we can target disadvantage through other ways within a rising schools budget. But Michael Gove, first of all, he is not being allowed to match us on spending this year, next year and the year after. George Osborne says we'll protect the NHS, but schools will be cut. Secondly, his pupil premium and his free market schools would cost somewhere between £1.5 and £3.5 billion a year, and he cannot tell us how he's going to pay for that. I'll tell you how it will be paid for, by cuts to other schools, fewer teachers and larger class sizes. That wouldn't be progress. That would be a step backwards to excellence for some. It would not be good for children in our country. Thanks, Ed.
I'm going to follow Ed's lead by seeking in this bit to try to bring out the differences between the political parties, because we were all relatively consensual in the first bit. And I'm going to direct my first comments to Ed and then my second lot of comments to Michael. I first met Ed, I think about, was it 10 or maybe 13 years ago, when he told me that he thought that the Lib Dem demands for additional funding for education and health from the Labour government, which had just started, made us sound like the militant tendency of the Labour Party. And then, fortunately, 1 year or 2 years later, the government turned on the taps, and at last the money, which we needed to flow in education, started to flow. So I congratulate him for the U-turn on that. I congratulate him for fighting hard as a Secretary of State for funding. I want more funding to go into it so that we can target disadvantage, not simply move the money around. Where Ed doesn't persuade me very much is on the intelligent accountability and the freedom aspects. Ed is the archetypal man in the ministry in London and Westminster who thinks he knows best. We had an exchange in the House of Commons recently when we were talking about our pupil premium, and he said, but if you give all this pupil premium to schools and head teachers, how do you know that they won't just spend it on the right thing unless you tell them what to do with it? And that has been the thinking of this government and perhaps successive governments for too long, that there isn't a large element of trust. And on the school report card, I think that that is a big missed opportunity, because actually what changed my mind about the existing plans is that the school report card is simply going to consolidate existing information about schools. We actually need something that's a lot better than that. On Michael, I now turn to his side of it. Michael, as you've already seen, is by far and away the most charming member of the Tory shadow cabinet, and also a very good example of the benefits of the Scottish education system. But I've got two very, very big problems that prevent me from cuddling any closer to him. Firstly, and quite genuinely, it makes me despair that the Conservative Party is now talking about a broken Britain and all the challenges that there are, including in education. And yet in their manifesto, when it comes to setting priorities, cutting inheritance tax for a few very rich people is a bigger priority than protecting the schools budget. And they're even talking about cutting it. And I just think that speaks volumes for me. And secondly, while Michael is often very rational, his policies are often very dotty. And let me just list a few of them. Excluding vocational qualifications from all league tables. That's mad. That would be a huge disincentive to young people who want to take those. Excluding his maths advisor, Carol Vorderman, from the possibility of teaching in schools because of this threshold of having to get better than a third. Abolishing all of the national curriculum for a minority of free schools, and then imposing an even more imposing national curriculum on the majority of the 23,500 other schools. Bonkers. And the policy announced last week, which is vintage ballsism, I'm afraid, of suggesting that the bottom 75 performing schools that are in special measures would be taken over and turning it into academies, particularly when you find out that one of those schools is already an academy.
Thank you.